up to speed and we all have the latest stuff. We're live. All right. Welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. It is Friday, March 13th, and it certainly is Friday the 13th. My name's Representative Kathleen James. I'm from Manchester. Good timing.
Campbell from St. Johnsbury.
Perfect.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Eric Torrey, Washington 2.
Laura Sibelian, Wyndham 2.
Great. In the room?
Daniel Perry from the Crossing Group.
Jared Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee.
John Verone, Vermont Natural Resources Council.
Dylan Zucchi of Leonine.
Rick Perry, PUC.
Maria Rodworth, Legislative Council.
Super. All right. Just to make sure that we are where I think we are. Just big picture this afternoon, we've got 2 bills to vote out before we adjourn for the day so that we can hit our crossover deadline. And I have a couple little updates that we can save till later. But right now we've got a bunch of people in the room, so we're going to dive right into H727 so that we can have a final discussion, decide what we have the capacity and the time to do and not do today, while recognizing that there's going to be plenty of work on this bill on the Senate side, and then it'll almost certainly be coming back to us. So I think where we are is we have a new draft, draft 1.4, dated 3/12 at 2:11 p.m. So we are going to walk through that.
Do we have our copies?
We have a letter that we received back from House Environment yesterday, and that has been posted on our website, and I circulated that to everybody. We have some further thoughts about PFAS language that we may or may not have time to hash out today, but I definitely want to make sure we talk about it. And we have sort of PUC versus Act 250 conversation that we may or may not have time to resolve today, but we do have a LURB here and we have PUC here, which is good. That's kind of where we're at. So why don't we start, Marie, if you don't mind, if we could start by walking through the latest draft, and maybe as we go along, remind us which, if any of these various sources we've got changes and suggestions flowing in from different spaces. If you know where stuff came from,
Sure.
that would be helpful too.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I think I incorporated so you could see in context the recommendations from Chair Sheldon.
Great.
Environment, and also the recommendation from DNRC. Again,
Super.
just so you could see it in here.
Okay.
But I'll note that again when we get to those sections.
Great.
So hopefully this reflects, in other respects, some decisions you made yesterday. The first one being on page 3, subdivision 5. These are the provisions, contractual provisions, and I think you ultimately decided to not specify how the charge for excess demand would be calculated. So striking which shall be calculated by kilowatt hour, and leaving it as written. And then in subdivision 6, you had talked about maybe putting some decommissioning language, and I think you're going to just leave it now as a study and report back. So striking that language. So then getting into the PUC findings that need to be made before a contract is approved. I just highlighted some of the subdivisions, just the numbers that have some overlap with Act 250, and just because I'm aware that you're kind of thinking about that, whether there should be some whether you want to leave these provisions in or not. So anyway, just wanted to highlight the subdivision numbers. Page 6, striking the decommissioning findings, there. And then yesterday, you also requested that new subsection F, which had to do with the ability of a data center to become a self-managed utility. That was, you just wanted to be silent on that. As opposed to specifically saying that they have the ability to do that. There's nothing in here that prevents them from doing that. Then under the water use provisions, if Mike O'Grady can speak to these a little bit more specifically, but I'll just note that on page 8, subdivision 3, this is just clarification language that Mike added. That was somehow lost in translation. So just clarifying the data center shall identify where the data center will. So that's just new language clarifying. Subdivision E1. These are the new language highlighted here reflects proposals by Chair Sheldon. So a data center shall obtain all applicable water quality and water resource protection permits from A&R, including stormwater, shoreline stream alteration, direct discharge, surface water withdrawal, groundwater withdrawal, wetland, and river corridor development permits. Then on page 9, Chair James mentioned, and Michael Grady agreed, wanting to have a specific date and time with respect to the Federal Clean Water Act, Section 401, because that may be amended soon. And so this just specifies on line 6 as those criteria existed under the Act and any regulations adopted thereunder on January 1st of this year. So just preserving in time those federal criteria.
And question on that.
Yeah.
Do you know that those criteria have not changed since January of 2025? Do we know that?
I actually don't know much at all. I
Okay.
just know that Mike suggested this.
Okay.
So I can confirm with him, talk with him. He might actually be here later. So, yeah.
And he knew our intent.
Yeah.
He was here for that conversation.
And so, then subsection F, this reflects some revisions proposed by the NRC. Do you want me to read through them, or do you want to hear from BNRC, or what's one?
I would find it helpful for you to just do it on there. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I think let's keep going, and then I think we're going to have to come back. I want to
Sure.
make sure we don't lose the
Okay.
lose our folks from the land use review board.
Got it. Okay. So subsection G, the yellow highlighted language comes as a recommendation from Chair Sheldon, and then the gray highlighted language are proposed revisions to her language. This is a whole new subsection. Anyway, we'll let the party speak about that.
the gray are revisions to Chair Sheldon's.
Correct. Revisions proposed by BNRC. And this has to do with PFAS in discharged water. So the
Pass in the air. Talk about that some more.
Oh, too soon.
So, and then I just wanted to note, section 2 is the trigger for F-250 review. And I'm just noting a recommendation by Chair Sheldon, who suggested perhaps lowering the threshold for triggering F-250 review. You have it at 20 megawatts of power. Maybe lowering that or considering a different criterion such as water use. Just noting that. Oh, and I did look 20 meg in terms of AI data centers, 20 megawatts seems to be the kind of the floor for what other states are considering. Many of them are 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts. I haven't found any yet that were below 20 megawatts, specific to data centers, just to put that out there. The other thing I wanted to clarify yesterday, yeah, yes.
Yeah. So let's just get clear on that, because we know that there are some, maybe they're not actually data centers, smaller type, places that I think it'll be data center, like one megawatt that are here now
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
so what is you just clarify the difference, please?
Yes, so I think there are three traditional smaller data centers operating in Vermont right now. They do cloud computing services, primarily or data storage, for businesses and so on. Combined, I think they use 0.5 megawatt of power.
So the difference is the amount of power that the data center uses. So we are talking about data centers that use 20 megawatts of power or not a data center that uses less, which presumably is a lot smaller.
Correct. And the other thing you had asked me to look into, how much power crypto mining
Mhm.
facilities use, and it's a really broad range. This is just a quick Google search, but it could be anywhere from 1 megawatt of power to 500. So,
Right.
it just depends on the size and capability. I have no idea. So,
And this is not applicable.
no.
I did talk to Chair Sheldon about this, her concern, or, her flag on this. And her point is, because I told her that you had done some research and this was the lowest kind of threshold that any state was looking at in kind of perspective or, considered legislation at this point. And her response was sort of along the lines of, well, that doesn't really matter. My question is, what is the impact of a 19 megawatt center here in Vermont or a 15 megawatt center here in Vermont? And I don't know the answer to that. And I don't think we can answer it today. I'm just going to flag that for something maybe we could think about as the bill moves over to the Senate. And I certainly don't think we have the bandwidth to consider a different trigger like water use unless, when we're done with the walkthrough, unless our land use review board folks could, to me, it would be an and, not an instead. But again, I'm not sure we're going to hash that out today. So anyway, I just wanted to flesh that out because I did talk to her about that concern.
Okay. Her other concern is reflected in the application already. We reviewed that. That's for the existing operational data centers. If they want to expand capacity, that they would also be covered. So then the new study on data center decommissioning, I did look at, there's one proposed bill in Oklahoma that addresses this issue. So I looked at their proposal. I also looked at some of the decommissioning requirements under federal law for data centers on federal land. And we'll just read through this. So the Commissioner of Public Service, in consultation with the Secretary of Natural Resources, the Chair of the Land Use Review Board, and any other interested stakeholders deemed appropriate by the Commissioner, shall conduct a study on data center decommissioning, and just a reference to the definition in this bill of data center. The purpose of this study is to develop a regulatory model for ensuring responsible data center decommissioning in a manner that protects and preserves the environment and public health and welfare. The model shall include standards and procedures that address approval of a decommissioning plan by the appropriate regulatory entity, regulatory oversight of the decommissioning process, including through site visits and inspections, a bond requirement or other financial assurance to ensure a data center is solely responsible for the costs associated with the implementation of an approved decommissioning plan, guidelines for data sanitization, the physical destruction of highly sensitive storage devices, and documented chain of custody for information technology assets, guidelines for environmental compliance, hazardous material handling, environmental remediation, and site restoration, a timeline for commencing and completing the decommissioning process after the abandonment, closure, destruction, or permanent cessation of operations of a data center, and any other matters deemed appropriate by the commissioners. And then December 15th of this year, the commissioner shall submit recommendations for a data center decommissioning regulatory model in the form of draft legislation to this committee, the House Environment Committee, and the Senate Committees on Finance and on Natural Resources and Energy.
Thanks for doing that research.
Can I just say one more thing? Yesterday you asked about the square footage of a data center, and I got my zeros wrong. It's not 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
It's 100,000 square feet is kind of the minimum for a 20 megawatt facility. Anyway, I want to share that. For the bookstore, you're not going to be able to.
Thanks for all the research on the decommissioning. That's great. Okay, I want to just, let's see, I want to find out about people's time. So, I know that the land use review board folks have been waiting patiently, and I don't know what your time frame is. And then I also want to find out how long Attorney O'Grady can stay. So we have
I
one
can be here
or
for the rest of the
There they are.
great.
There they are.
Okay. All right. So if you can wait, Mike. Okay. So thank you so much. I'm sorry our schedule changed. We had a long floor session.
Really understandable.
Yeah, so we really appreciate you being here. So we've had suggestions from a couple different fronts to try to remove language that is duplicative between the PUC process and the Act 250 process. And just to remind you, and I'm just boiling this down very simply, we have two different things going on in this bill. The siting of the facility, we have added a trigger, so that is handled entirely by Act 250. And then the contract between the data center and the utility, the large load contract, will be developed by those entities and reviewed and approved by the PUC. And so I think the concern is that we have the PUC replicating a bunch of Act 250 stuff in the contract process, and that's not appropriate. Where we've kind of bogged down is making sure that we are not Act 250 experts in this room, but the concerns that you guys will address in Act 250 are, I think, paramount to many of us around the table. And so we want to make sure we're not accidentally, glibly sort of striking stuff that we really intend for someone to be looking at. And so that's kind of our goal here. And I think that I put away my older draft. We had comments on this from Mr. Faber, who's here in the room. I can get that draft out. But we are talking about page 4 of draft 1.4. And we're kind of starting on line 6, where it says, before the commission approves a large load service equity contract, the commission shall find that. So we're kind of near the top of page 4. And what we want to do,
We're following. Yeah, thank you.
is go through that language starting on page 4 all the way down to midway through page 6. And make sure that we're not sticking stuff into the contract that could, should, will be handled by Act 250. And make sure we don't leave anything out. So I think that's where we're at. And we appreciate your time.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. We're happy to be here. And I think your legislative council identified the same areas that we were looking at in terms of any duplication in terms of process through that contract. Let me, scrolling too far here now. Right.
And without taking too much of your
Yeah, there
time,
it is.
we're at
Yeah.
specific
So-
line edit time.
Sure. Let me jump in there.
Yeah, jump in and go through it. Yeah.
So on page 4, line 13 through 20, we believe can be struck. We believe that all of those descriptors of criteria and also the specification of the Act 250 criteria and the other language is, we have gone through this, myself, Pete Gill, and Jenny Ronis, our general counsel. We have gone through and come to the conclusion that all of paragraph 3 can be struck. And
Does
if
that
there are
greenhouse-
specific questions, we can go through them individually if you would like.
I think only well, other committee members may have questions, but we've actually, Maria developed a really helpful kind of side-by-side for us this morning, which I did send around to committee members. And I had a question, or many of us had a question about greenhouse gas emissions, but it sounds like that is included in the Act 250 process, so we don't need to be worried about that either.
Yeah, criteria 9F addresses reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so
Question.
yeah, so lines 13 through 20, Rep. Sabili?
So I
Yep.
just want to make sure that criteria is tied to GWSA.
Okay.
Sorry, the acronym there.
Global Warming Solutions Act. That's where, so it's tied to our
Oh.
statutory requirements.
It is.
Reduction of greenhouse. gas.
Yeah, the language in Act 250 is a permit will be granted when it has been demonstrated by the applicant that in addition to reflects the principles of energy conservation, including reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from the use of energy. There isn't a specific site to the Global Warming Solutions Act, just if that's the question. Yeah.
But it does go on to say, it's about including reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from the use of energy and incorporate the best available technology for efficient use or recovery of energy. And then they refer also to the applicable building energy standards under 30 VSA sections 51 or 53.
Okay, I think this language that is in here now is specifically referencing, because it's saying requirements. What it is, I think it's the GW. It says that section of law, I believe. And so I think it is not, I think it's different. And so we had talked about will not have an undue adverse effect on the attainments, striking everything except to that. And I wonder about putting cross-reference there to the section of statute.
Rep. Klepner, and then I don't know if Maria has a thought.
Yes, I just wonder how the Act 250 process is going to be able to evaluate individual projects as they come before it for how they fit in with the state's emission reduction requirements. And it actually sounds to me as though if the Act 250 process requires the best technology and reductions, that's
So we can move
probably,
this to the contract.
I would agree with that. Yes.
I'm sorry, agree with what?
Move
I would
it to the
agree
contract.
with taking it out of this
250
section, yes.
Well, this is contract.
This is,
This is the
we're in the
contract.
We're in
contract.
the contract.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
I
I think
actually
we-
have a-
I think we can leave it out of the contract. It feels to me as though the Act 250 process does on an individual project basis what the Global Warming Solutions Act aims to do on a statewide basis, which is to say, minimize emissions.
the Global Warming Solutions Act does not minimize emissions. It puts in place requirements for the reduction of emissions and requires a plan to attain those reductions and
Yes.
provides for relief if we don't put forward a plan or make progress.
But I have the same question as Rep. Klepner. If the Act 250 process explicitly requires design principles that reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the use of energy. That's specific to to that building. That's what we want. And I'm similarly not understanding how we link one specific project to the state's
To a 30%
Progress.
reduction versus 1990
making
goal.
its GWSA goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
That's like-
potentially 10% of the state's power could be one of these. So that's a potential pretty significant impact, I would think. No,
So, yes, I agree, but I don't know how the land use review board looking at a project will say this contributes enough to the state's goals or doesn't contribute enough. Yeah, like if the state's goal is to get to 20% below 1990 emission.
not asking for a measurement. It's saying will not have an undue adverse effect on the attainment of.
Well, I could see, I hear you. It's not the responsibility of one data center to meet our state goals. It's the responsibility of state government to meet our state goals. But what you're suggesting, I think, and I'm fine with this, could be just to leave in will not have an undue adverse effect on the attainment of the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements. Again, though, we're in the contract.
That's right.
And that is not the PUC's responsibility in this contract to ascertain whether this project is hindering or aiding our state government's responsibility to hit the GWSA. So I don't know how we put it in here. I feel like it's an Act 250 thing.
I will just summarize by saying as a strong supporter of the GWSA, I feel that the criteria in Act 250 will do their job of making sure that the projects that come before them will help the state meet its goals. It will not adversely impact the state's goals.
Does it say generation?
Um, That's a good question. Generating projects.
Right, because of these lines.
So generating projects,
It doesn't have the word generation.
It's a finding that the data center will not have an undue adverse effect on the attainment of the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements.
which doesn't seem harmful to me, actually, leave it
I
in.
mean, I think it gets us into the territory we've been talking about, which is that the PUC is gonna have to look at the 250 permit or something.
I mean, it'll cause a little bit of duplication of effort, which we're trying to avoid, because now we will have both the 250 process looking at emission reduction and the PUC looking at them. But it's not a huge implication of that.
Well, actually, let's ask a clarifying question.
Yeah.
In that criteria, is Act 250 required to find that a project does not have an undue adverse effect on the state's greenhouse gas requirements? So that is the Global Warming Solutions Act.
No, I don't. I think that the language is a little bit different because it is on a project basis, which in the aggregate would have an impact there, but there is no linkage that I'm aware of where it would be measured against the state goals or measurements. But because the requirement is specific to the project, and so I think requiring that this includes reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from the use of energy and incorporate the best available technology for efficient use or recovery. So that this is a standalone project, and we are having to determine whether or not it accomplishes that singular goal, which seems like it is in concert with the overall policy. But it does not, we would not be measuring it versus the state aggregate goal.
One other
Possible to
thing.
do that on a project basis.
I think that's correct. And I, we're not advocating one way or the other necessarily on this, but want to make sure that you all have the kind of the full picture of what we do under 9F so you can make the decision of whether it's meeting your goals and processes there. But I will just say too that under Act 181, we were given a purpose under Act 250, which is great. And part of that says that, and let me just read it here. The purpose of this chapter is to protect and conserve the environment. Give you a little ellipses there. And then it says, and the conservation vision and goals of the state established in section 2802 of this title. And then let me go to that, which includes specific goals, including the efficient use of energy to provide for development of renewable energy resources and reduction in emissions of greenhouse gases. So that general principle that you're talking about is then again incorporated through kind of the Act 250 purpose section includes that reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Don't know if that satisfies where you guys want to go with this, but just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And then I think Brooke referenced the RBs and the CBs in terms of, I would assume it would be the commercial building energy standards that would be applicable in these types of developments. Those benchmarks would have to be met under Act 250. But again, under Act 250, that we have some ability to go beyond those in certain instances as well.
All right. It sounds to me like the Act 250, the overarching Act 250 framework accomplishes what we're trying to get at. And then specifically on the project basis, the Act 250 criteria ensure that the planning and design of the facility must include the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So I would be comfortable cutting lines 13 through 20, including the mention of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, because what it feels like to me is like we're trying to apply the state government's responsibility to reach GWSA deadlines to individual projects, an individual contract between a utility and a data center. And that doesn't really make sense to me. It's on a much smaller scale. It would be like taking the construction of a new campus at the state colleges and making that building individually responsible for the GWSA goals. That's not who's in charge of it. It's state government that's in charge of it. So
Yeah.
I propose cutting those lines. Campbell's hands up.
I am wondering whether we just ask in the contract for the data center to provide a calculation of what their greenhouse gas emissions will be. And for the PUC to consider whether those emissions are, let's see, I wrote down, I think, language that Rep. Sevilla used, will not have an undue adverse impact on the state's emissions. That's a suggestion.
In the interest of not belaboring this, I'm fine with striking this. I would just want to call to our attention, keep hearing references. Yesterday I heard references to warehouses with servers. Today I'm hearing an aspect of the state college campuses. I think we are really way under the impact in terms of power and water with those references. So I just note that. I think we have still a lot to learn about the size of these and the scale of these. So I'm looking forward to learning more about those.
Yeah, and I did say on a much smaller scale. My point was an individual, project versus who's responsible for achieving the GWSA goals. And it's the state government.
Yes, and so when the state government is issuing or approving a contract, I think right now it says that they would find that this doesn't have an adverse impact.
Right.
But I agree that we could take it out.
All right, let's strike those lines. And what is next in terms of Act 250, possible duplicative Act 250 language?
Sure, I would add, if you could go to page 5, line 7, which is paragraph 6. Will
Okay.
not have, let me let you get there for a sec. And I think we chatted about this a little bit the other day, will not have an adverse effect on any segment of the waters of the state that have been designated as outstanding resource waters by the Secretary of the Natural Resources Agency. We really do feel that that is covered adequately in criterion 1, which is air and water pollution, but there are several sub-criteria that that certainly endeavor to protect all of our surface waters, our water supplies. It is very comprehensive, and so this is a small subset of the waters of the state that are protected through criterion 1. So we chatted about this, discussed it at length, and we are comfortable believing that calling out those particular waters is unnecessary because of the other criteria within Act 250.
Okay.
Just to augment what Brooke was saying there too, the water criteria under 1 is no undue water will not result in any undue water pollution. So that's a very broad mandate under Act 250 for protection of waters. And then there are those subsequent more specific areas. We also have, it's not as related to the outstanding waters, but we also have criterion 3, which is will not cause an undue, unreasonable burden on the existing water supply if one is to be utilized. So that's, I think we talked about this last time we chatted with you all too, that, you know, if you're going to be affecting other people's wells, for instance, that would be covered under that criteria.
Okay.
And just to very briefly, just tick off some of the sub-criteria of criterion 1. We protect our headwaters. We have water conservation sub-criteria, flood hazard and river corridors, of course, streams, shorelines, wetlands, and then reasonably foreseeable needs of subdivision or development for sufficient water availability. We have those water supply protections that I mentioned the other day, and then the soil erosion and et cetera, other criteria that Pete was just mentioning.
Okay, everybody okay with that? Okay.
Great. Then same page in lines 13 through 16, we have paragraph 8 complies with applicable air pollution control requirements under the Federal Clean Air Act. And then it talks about when it's in effect and inconsistency with state statute. We really think that this is unnecessary and in fact somewhat problematic in terms of the supremacy clause, federal regulation, occupying the same arena as state regulation in terms of inconsistencies. Truly, we believe that air pollution and the involvement of ANR and air pollution permitting, which often gives a rebuttable presumption in this area, but it is studied by our experts at ANR, provided evidence to Act 250 commissions, and we feel the discretion of ANR that is offered through the Act 250 process, although it's rebuttable, is a very sound method to ensure that air pollution is adequately regulated.
It's very similar to under 1 water. As Brooke mentioned before, it's 1 water and 1 air. So it's the same standard that you will not result in undue air pollution. So it's very broad and has a lot of flexibility in terms of its application to a particular development.
And I think
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and we also did mention the other day that noise, if it pertains to an ill health effect, is also one of the air pollution criteria. So our air pollution criteria is actually broader, I would argue, than the federal statute. So we feel like we really are buttoned up on that area very well.
So, Brooke, just one thing, what I'm hearing you say is our standard is higher than the Federal Clean Air Act?
Yes.
Okay, so we were concerned about any rollbacks to the Federal Clean Air Act, but citing it is probably more problematic than not citing it in that regard, so. Right.
Yeah, it creates a real conundrum, the way in which it looks like it's secondary to the state statute. And I think that would create some difficulties legally in trying to
Okay.
analyze what is the controlling law.
All right, so strike 13 through 16.
Okay. And then lines 17 through 19 is number 9. That is complies with harvesting procedures and procurement standards that ensure long-term forest health and sustainability, including the guidelines and standards adopted under 10 VSA 2750, which in fact, those are the harvesting procedures and procurement standards that's being called out there.
Okay.
And that criteria, we believe,
C, yeah.
is covered by 9C, which is the productive forest soils criteria, and somewhat 9K, but also 8C, which of course is the new criteria that Act 181 has created. And so that has to do with fragmentation of forests. So we think that we have this area covered, and plus the standards that are indicated, maybe Pete can jump in because he's a little bit more familiar. We were trying to study this area before we were testifying, but I think that those are standards that would be utilized, for example, if because they're administered by ANR. And so what would typically occur in the analysis under Act 250 is ANR would provide conditions or request conditions or a position that would pertain to those standards that you're referring to. So they would be part and parcel of the Act 250 process when ANR would be filing their comments on a particular project. So we think it's unnecessary.
I think you covered that
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
Are you okay with that? Okay.
And then the next one down is paragraph 10. It's the state energy efficiency requirements, including the commercial building energy standards, which in 9G we cover, and those are the standards that we refer to. So we think that is also duplicative. And that was lines 20.
Yeah, the next one is
That was lines
through this one, right? 20.
20 and 21. Okay. Anything else? I think that's it.
Yep.
Great. Act 250 doesn't cover, I'm now at the top of page 6. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't look it up, but I'm assuming 3 VSA Chapter 72 is our environmental justice law, which is not accounted for in Act 250, right? So we're good leaving that in.
Well, yeah, we are a covered agency, but so is the PUC. So even though it's not part and parcel of, it's not like a criteria within Act 250, we are subject to that. So we are required to balance those benefits and burdens, make sure that we are not acting arbitrarily and capriciously, ensuring that those focus populations are being engaged and heard and incorporated, certainly in our land use planning position or job that we're working on right now. And I'm looking at Jenny Ronas
Just get a
to
thought.
supplement if there's anything I've
But it's
missed.
not an Act 250 criteria, so individual projects are not reviewed for EJ.
Okay, and what she's making sure that I say is because the EJ law is not a criterion, we do not, in the processing of an application for a project, it is not something that is dealt with or discussed within a permit itself. But the PUC is subject to it, we're subject to it. So I don't think there's any harm in leaving it in there. It's appropriate, but it's not something I don't think that is going to be seen in Act 250 expressed in any kind of permit or permit conditions.
Yeah, I'm just. Did you have a specific question? I'm trying to wrap my head around my question.
Just a comment, which is, I am so fascinated by this comment here, and that's just an interesting thing to think about,
Yeah,
of Act 250 and environmental justice.
I'm thinking about that intersection too, like,
Yeah.
because, you know, you often think that projects like this wind up citing, you know, they often wind up impacting kind of the most vulnerable populations or the most, so it's interesting to know that nobody is specifically,
Yeah.
I have to think about
Yeah,
that.
so the
I'm not
environmental
gonna solve that right
justice.
here, but that's just, this
It's an
is,
Act 250 issue.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
We should leave it in.
it's,
Yeah, I think we should leave it in.
a matter of time and implementation of those requirements as well. The environmental justice pieces are being put into place on a statewide level, and those discussions are happening. And we will be right there working on implementing those into our processes over time, as those are made uniform on the state processes.
Okay.
So although they're not a specific criteria in Act 250 right now, they will be implemented through our process on those timelines.
Okay. Um,
So this is now incumbent on the PUC. I'm not gonna get stuck on this. I'm just gonna flag for everyone that I find this discussion to be extremely interesting. And
yeah, at some point on my own time, I'm gonna learn more about the EJ timeline and how it's being incorporated. I just never really thought about it till right now. So, okay. Did we hit all of the, assuming, is everybody okay with all the edits we just discussed?
I think there might have been one more. Yes, there was one more that I had heard from the PUC, which I'm sure they'll correct me if I misspeak, but it was back on page 4. Line 7. That the proposed data center, including any upgrades to electric generation, distribution, and transmission facilities necessary to power the data center. What I've heard from the PUC is that is duplicative with Act 250.
Upgrades to generation, distribution, and transmission is duplicative to Act 250?
I put the question mark there as well, but you know, the PUC.
So there,
One sec, Greg.
Can I probably
Yeah,
explain?
one sec.
Or-
Mr. Faber's gonna clarify.
So Greg Paper with PC for the record. So this is all about the demarcation between the service contract and the actual review, the site review of the building.
Yeah.
So Act 50 is going to do the site review of the building. This language pertains to our review of the contracts. So I thought it would be appropriate to have on line 7, where it says the commission shall find that if period or semicolon at that point, it, then you go to one, will not adversely, and then you go through all the remaining, conditions. That's all I'm saying.
Right, because one
Oh, okay.
is the effect.
Right.
Infrastructure.
The proposed data center will be reviewed by Act 250, so having it in both places
Okay.
doesn't make any sense.
Is that okay with everybody? The commission shall find that it, and then we go into all the bullet points.
Yeah.
And we've taken out the duplicative PUC Act 250 stuff. So I feel like we've made progress in clearly delineating between Act 250 and contract review. Okay, so shall find that it. Okay. All right. Starting down within one, unchanged, will not adversely efficiency, blah, blah, power system. Okay. So I think that, Brooke and Peter, you're welcome to stick around for our water conversation. We're moving into water next, but I'm sure you do not want to go. I feel positive that you probably don't want to do that. But you're invited.
We thank you for the invitation. We happen to be at a staff all day retreat and
I know, I'm
training.
really sorry.
Oh, no. It's fine. We're so glad to have this opportunity to help contribute to this effort. We think that these are very important. It's a very important trigger, and getting it right is important. The one thing I will just say in closing is we did look at the remediation section, not the new language. I did not see that before we sat down here, but very glad to see that's being addressed in a comprehensive way to be studied, because we kind of looked at each other and said, gee, we know what to do to reclaim a quarry, but gosh, I don't understand what the issues would be. And we thought, well, PUC would probably be better at that. So we're very glad to see that that important aspect will be finalized. This literally just flew into my own head, but one of the things that is important to know about quarries, for example, Act 250, that is the only situation, I think, that we have finite permits in Act 250 that go away. They don't run with land forever and ever. When a quarry is completed with its remediation, and that is inspected and certified by our district coordinators, at that point in time, a finding is made that Act 250 has been satisfied and jurisdiction dissolves on that property, which is a unique situation within Act 250. That might be something that is considered in terms of these data centers after the remediation, and once they are certified to be completed, that might be a similar situation where one would want jurisdiction to dissolve, like the quarry cases. I just bring it up for conversation because it's something perhaps to think about.
Turns out we have two more questions. Rep Sibilia?
Yeah, thanks for bringing us back to this before you left us. So I think I have heard nearly unanimous, maybe I'm wrong, interest by the committee, making sure that we have decommissioning language in here, and also nearly unanimous language from all of the connected agencies, like this is not us. And so I think Maria has drafted, and there's concern amongst a number of different agencies. So Maria has drafted something I think that is really helpful. We thought it was helpful yesterday. There's one piece that before you leave us, I would like to ask. So right now this is constructed as a study, and I think that word is causing some anxiety. And I don't know if that is, if we intend for it to be a study or a collaboration or a report or a recommendation. Yes. And so, I had a kind of a flag, like, do I need to hire experts for this? Which is not a question for you so much, but just your input on the process for coming together with the different agencies to what I'm envisioning, and I think we all agree to it, are recommendations from the appropriate experts in state government to us about
what should be included.
And draft legislation.
And draft legislation.
Yeah,
Yes. Sorry, that was a lot of words.
You want to start there?
You go.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll just say, as you all are very acutely aware, the board is very preoccupied with a number of rulemaking, implementation of Act 181. So appreciate the fact that the Commissioner of Public Service is the lead on that study, if that's the direction you choose on this. But I think it is important to have that consultation with the LURB. So appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think particularly because, if that's going to be an Act 250 function, it's going to come over with us, which I would assume perhaps that would be what folks would want so that we can follow up like we normally do and ensure conditions are fulfilled and all of that. But no, I think this is very important to accomplish. This is very informative in terms of all of the areas that you want looked at and covered. So that's great. And to find those answers quickly is important, obviously, to get these provisions in place in statutory language for you. So I think it's a terrific thing to do, to get it right in the right specificity to make sure that these centers that will have significant impacts, that we are not left with, the same problem that we have historically with some of the quarries that went away where people did not fulfill their obligations. So we appreciate the opportunity to really look into this. It's an important protection for the environment for the future.
I think we should move on. So, all right. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you again for having us.
Okay. Water. Mike.
Hi.
Hi. Okay. So I'm also checking off against the House Environment list right now, just so you guys know. So we have ticked off everything that environment raised for us under land use, except for the trigger being 20 megawatts. And I just don't think we're going to solve that today. Let's just think about that on the Senate side. Rep. Howland?
Well, it's a percentage of the state total load, total peak at 2%. So with the 20,000, I think this is about the electric effect. That's why the 20 megawatts.
Okay.
Go forward.
Would you like me to walk through the water system?
Sure. So let's see. Maria, you said, sorry, just reminding, you added all the water stuff that Chair Sheldon and her committee recommended is in there.
Correct.
Okay.
And also as a
VNRC.
Yep, a proposed, yeah.
Okay. So I think we need to hear from our water expert.
Okay.
So just a quick question on 286. So this has gotten flagged as it should be living in Title 10. So speech in here.
I
Second that.
think that that's really up to you. This could go into Title 10 because the district commission is the one making many of these decisions. So that's definitely a viable choice.
Let's talk when we get there. If that's okay.
Sure.
I gotta go in order.
Okay. So the definition of closed loop cooling system remains effectively the same. Sealed cooling process, which is the safe water cooling circulates continuously within a data center's cooling system. That withdrawal water from municipal public water supply, groundwater, surface water.
Mike, what page are you on?
I am on page 6 going on to page 7.
Okay.
Except for de minimis discharges authorized under a discharge group by ANR.
All right. So
Then
yeah. Okay.
the definition of PFAS is the
US EPA definition of PFAS under the Toxic Substances Control Act.
I did have a question about that. Sorry, I keep bringing this up. I know we talked about this kind of at length. But this is pegged to the federal EPA and the 40 specific compounds, flags, trigger. I
Well,
don't know what
there's
they're called.
potentially more than 40 that fall underneath these compounds. What the 40 is referencing is the assessment method that EPA currently has for monitoring of PFAS. So there's more than 40 that fall underneath this definition, but EPA only has an assessment method that monitors reports.
And we talked about whether there was any more stringent Vermont-based standard, and I don't remember the answer.
By stringent, do you mean
I
encompassing
don't know, tests from-
chemicals?
Yeah.
Yes, there are. But there's also less stringent as well. So in your consumer products regulation, ski wax, firefighting equipment, etc., you define PFAS as any fully fluorinated compound, chemical with any fully fluorinated compound. And that's the definition that creates a universe of 14,000 to 15,000 chemicals. The less stringent version is where you would find the hazardous waste rules, the I rule, the drinking water standards. They define specific PFAS and sometimes cumulatively the compounds of them. And they're usually about 5 to 6 specific chemicals that are listed.
Let's go on while I think about that.
So when a data center is in the Act 250 process, they identify to both the PUC and to the district commission how the data center will cool the facility. If it's going to use water, it has to use that closed loop cooling system to minimize impacts to the quality and quantity of surface water and groundwater, unless the district commission determines that the use of the closed loop system is not feasible at the proposed data center. If it's using water to cool the data center, it has to identify where the data center will obtain water to cool the facility and where the cooling water will be discharged. I think in the transition and some translation from environment to here, that shall identify where the data center language was lost. It's not new, it's what they wanted. It's just that for some reason it didn't show in the translation. And then if the data center proposes to use groundwater to cool the data center, they have to obtain a groundwater withdrawal permit, notwithstanding the 57,600 gallon current threshold. So that's what triggers that groundwater withdrawal permit today. But you're saying regardless of if they're hitting that per day, they have to get a groundwater withdrawal permit. And they're not exempt because they may be using a standing column geothermal heat pump, because those are exempt from the groundwater withdrawal permit because of their closed loop nature. And then if the data center proposes to use surface water to cool the facility, the data center shall obtain a surface water withdrawal permit. Those are not available yet. They're probably not going to be available until 2027. I can't tell you what the thresholds are going to be, how they are going to apply, but this would require that facility to get that permit. And it would require the A&R rules for surface water withdrawals to provide that withdrawals would cease during drought conditions, which I think is something that they would incorporate into the permit anyway, because it would be consistent with the Vermont water quality standards and maintaining aquatic habitat, aquatic biota during drought conditions.
Sorry, which bit of this gets at the drought?
You're on page 8, line 16 and 17.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Alrighty. Yep, got it.
Then the data center is going to obtain all applicable water quality and water resource protection permits. And then you see the list: stormwater, shoreline, stream, all direct discharge, surface water, groundwater, withdrawal, wetland. This is partly duplicative when you list surface water and groundwater when you've already required it. I don't necessarily know if you need to list it again. But that was a request from the House Environment Committee.
So we're just saying it's not actually adding an extra layer of.
You've already said that they have to attain it. And now you're saying that to attain all applicable.
So we're just
ones.
being clear about what, that's great.
I don't think it's necessary, but I also don't think it does any harm.
Thank you.
Yes.
Better said.
And then a data center shall obtain from A&R a water quality certificate that meets the same criteria that a Clean Water Act, Section 401 water quality cert meets for those criteria under 33 USC 1251 to 1388. That's the Clean Water Act. And any regulations adopted thereunder on January 1, 2026. I'm not sure if it was a member of the committee or Maria that inspired the question of whether or not you should freeze in time the reference to the Clean Water Act. I do think that that's appropriate, and it's. I had a little bit of self-debate. The Trump administration is looking at whether or not to amend the 401 certification at the federal level, but industry doesn't want them to. There's been a back and forth in the 401 over the past few administrations, and the industry is getting exhausted. It's Friday afternoon on crossover day. I'm a little loopy.
Join the club.
I was reading a Dallas Federal Reserve Bank survey of the oil and gas industry, and they asked specifically about the 401. And one of the responses was like, "This is idiocy. We keep ping-ponging back and forth. Just pick one and keep it." And like, that's basically like what you're saying. You're going to freeze this in time the way it was January 1, 2026. So,
And of course, it hasn't changed since 2025.
it not since 2025. That's correct. What the Trump administration is doing right now is basically a stakeholder process looking at whether and how to amend the 401, and the feedback they're getting is, especially from those highly regulated industries like oil and gas, just stop, give us regulatory certainty, because we can't go forward without that regulatory certainty. Then if a data center that discharges wastewater into surface water, they shall identify the PFAS that may be used in the operation and submit a plan to A&R establishing a program that monitors the discharge of the presence of PFAS, which must be approved by the agency. So what this is, how this is different from language you previously saw, is that previously they were submitting to A&R a monitoring plan for PFAS. They weren't necessarily identifying PFAS that may be used in the operation. I think there was some discussion about whether or not the PFAS has to be, that's identified, it has to be those that are intentionally added, or any PFAS in the system. I think that's a policy decision. I think it will be difficult to identify all PFAS because it's with certainty. I think many of these types of industrial equipment, well, let me step back. One of the major uses of PFAS is for temperature control, heat resistance. And so I would imagine a facility that's built for cooling will have to have some sort of heat resistance and equipment that has heat resistance built into it. And it will I think it may be difficult for a data center to identify every specific PFAS that's part of their facility. So I think having this language that's a little bit open-ended, identify PFAS that may be used in the operation. I think that that's appropriate, especially since it now needs to be approved specifically by A&R.
So Mike, I'm sorry. So you're recommending. So you're okay with lines 8 through 12 as edited here, a data center that discharges wastewater shall identify PFAS. You think that's correct?
I think that's appropriate. It's a policy decision. I think it's appropriate. I don't know how it interacts or overlays with the next.
Okay, that was my
line,
question. So it's how,
because you, in the lines 8 through 12, you require a monitoring plan or a plan to establish a program that monitors the discharge of the presence of PFAS. But then you say that they can't be discharged. So why do you need a monitoring plan? So I don't, and discharge it doesn't have a mens rea. So
I don't know what that means.
it doesn't have an intent. You don't need to knowingly discharge or recklessly discharge or intentionally discharge. You just need to discharge. So I don't know how or why you have a monitoring plan if you have a prohibition on discharge, unless you just want to monitor any effluent from the facility. And as part of that monitoring plan, you monitor for PFAS that may be used in the operation.
We have BNRC here,
Can I
so
just speak to, I could explain what I was trying to do and then maybe we could talk about it. So the record, John Groveman, Vermont Natural Resources Council. So yeah, Mike is right. So the goal is not to discharge, and that language came from A&R, which is good. But I think we should check to see what actually is in the effluent. So you could say that it's prohibited, but I don't think that I think it would be good to know what's actually coming out, because I think there will be some PFAS that is in the wastewater, and it could be just PFAS from the water that you're pulling, for example, and it just in the water. But if there's monitoring reveals like really high levels, it would reveal that there's a problem, that something is getting discharged, even though there's a prohibition. There's still a discharge. Just because you say there's a prohibition doesn't mean that they're going to follow it. So it's kind of a condition. It's kind of a check, is what, to kind of see what was actually happening once these things were up and running. And the way it was structured is that it's a plan. I think the question is if you can monitor for whatever the EPA assessment is, however many you could monitor based on the EPA's methodology of assessment, then just see what's in there, and then A&R could react accordingly, right? You could reopen permits, you could, they have continuing authority to have oversight over the permits. So that was the intent, is just to basically have a check to see what actually was happening in there.
So if that's what you want to do, I think the language in 8 to 12 should be tweaked just slightly. It would say establishing a program that monitors the wastewater discharge from the data center, including monitoring for the presence of PFAS. So you're just monitoring the discharge and not just monitoring it for PFAS.
That works.
Yeah, and then I think the rest of it's fine.
I think,
Yeah, let's see what's going on.
we don't want PFAS discharged into the waters. So, we want to make it clear that you're not allowed to discharge.
Well, I want to stop you there. It's the addition of PFAS, because the other day, I think you asked, what if water comes in with PFAS in it? That may happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. that may
And
happen.
so it's when the facility, the data center is
Right.
adding.
Which sort of, okay, do you monitor the water going in and water going out and see if the PFAS level has gone up? I mean, that's sort of the only way I think to know that it's coming from that facility. But what we want is if the PFAS level is going up, you're not allowed to add PFAS. If you do, we want to know about it because we want you to figure it out and stop it. And
So you're saying there's no consequence?
Yeah, there's no, if the PFAS levels in the discharge water are higher than the PFAS levels in the intake water, then there needs to be, action to remediate. From my point of view.
Well, currently there's no requirement to remediate.
Indeed. So we'll just know that it's higher and be irritated.
Or the agency responds with their discretionary authority to say, because of those levels, you need to put in filtration or you need to take additional measures to reduce the PFAS. But there is no effluent standard right now under Vermont law for PFAS. But they have established prohibitions. I think at least Rep. Campbell's from the Northeast area. And you know that the landfill has a prohibition on effluent of PFAS. And so the agency is able to do that when they identify an issue.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. If you think sky high, numbers, the agency does have the authority, especially with the water quality certificate, to reopen these permits and then to require some action. It's hard to say what the action would be before it depends on what the evidence shows, essentially. So just want to give the state that authority, and then we're leaving it up to them as the experts that run these programs to take action. If they're not taking satisfactory action, maybe that's an issue that comes back to the legislature. The debate about creating a standard for PFAS is ongoing. The agency is legally required to create a standard, and they haven't done it. So I don't know. I mean, I think eventually they'll do it. I don't know when. I can't tell you when, but it's not like as if that's not an active issue that is not being worked on. So that will make all this easier.
Rep. Southworth?
Would it be appropriate that we include some language that if testing shows the elevated levels, then A&R will step in with appropriate measures or something to that effect?
Don't know what elevated levels would be.
Okay.
All right, because we don't have that initial standard.
Right.
And so what did you measure that against?
Okay.
They do have discretionary authority underneath their general water discharge authority when there is a contribution that they feel is contributing to water pollution to require permitting or to require honestly they can require it to stop.
Rep. Kleppner and then Mara?
Does anyone know how burdensome, time consuming, expensive, complicated it is to monitor water for PFAS?
I think that goes back to what universe you're talking about. If you're using the EPA definition,
The current one.
yeah, and you're using their EPA assessment method, that's something that's very viable and done. And I don't know the cost of it off the top of my head, but it's out there in that suite of testing methods. It's probably not as expensive as trying to test for every fluorinated compound and then doing basically a forensic analysis of what the increased fluorination might come from. That to me would probably be more expensive than doing, it's called EPA assessment method, like 1666 or something like that.
1633. I just looked it up.
1633.
This afternoon.
So
I mean, I don't know anything like you have to take water and send it off to the lab. Because if you just stick a wand in the water and it's wired to something that automatically tells you what's going on, then yeah, make them monitor intake and outtake. It's probably not that easy, I'm guessing.
I don't think it's that easy because you have timing and durational and volume that they're all usually part of monitoring. assessments. Like you don't just take a one time and then walk away, one time little vial, like that's enough. You have to do it over time and you have to take enough volume. And you have to take it from different places because there's what are called mixing zones. The closer to that discharge point, obviously it's going to be greater, right? Further away, solution is dilution kind of thing you're going to have, but you still want to test out there to see what the scale and scope of contamination away from the discharge point is. And so that's the type of, that's kind of what monitoring does. There's multiple facets of it.
But the drinking water standard is 5 parts per trillion, I think. So like if you're saying like 100 parts per trillion or 300, you know something's wrong, right? Like there shouldn't be those type of levels even in the water that you're taking, And so, and we sadly don't really know because we don't sample like the surface. We don't really know what the levels are in the various surface waters, but I would hope that they're not hundreds of, times what EPA is saying. Even for surface water, I think they did set like a guidance standard. I forget what it was. So we do have that information. And so you'd imagine that would be kind of the average baseline. So if you're seeing numbers way above that, that would be a flag. And then an ANR would be hopefully concerned and take action.
Do we have any sense of, in a closed loop system, how much discharge is going to be happening?
You have a sense, but it's not a great sense. So closed loop systems reduce water usage by 70 to 80%. So that depends on how much water you're using, right? And then they have a discharge from that system because a lot of the water will evaporate. So they will still have a discharge from that reduced amount of, it's like 5 to 10%.
It's still a sizable amount.
Well, it depends, right? It depends on where you start from. You reduce that by 70 to 80%. You then evaporate off that, and then what's left is 5 to 10. I mean, I can't even. There's somebody in a data center in Virginia that could probably give you that information, but it's not me.
Yeah. Hey, I can tell you.
I'm sorry. Brett Mark.
I hesitate to bring this up at this point, but we're highly focused on one class of chemicals here. And I'm wondering whether there are other classes of chemicals known or being invented in the near future before we get a data center 10 years from now that you want language to cover in this bill.
Yeah, like who does the toxics sort
I
of
mean,
thing?
there are other things besides PFAS that are potentially relevant.
So yes, and if you're discharging and you're discharging a certain pollutant that's already covered by the water quality standards, you're covered. You're going to have to get a discharge permit and you're going to have to meet those effluent limitations. So everything that's already listed, you have to get a permit for, and you have to meet those effluent limitations. And you may even need to do pre-treatment or other types of filtration. And so those chemicals, yes. Going into the future, it's naive to think that PFAS won't have alternatives and you won't know what they are, and you don't know what they are now. And that's a product of how the United States regulates toxic substances. It's not a precautionary approach. It's an initial analysis approach with general testing, but then it relies on kind of a reactionary approach.
So I guess the question is there language that we could put in here that would address future novel substances, or do we not even go there at this point?
I mean, you tried to do that in like 2017, 2018 to define like that class of what forever chemical is. And you couldn't define it. You had to refine it back down to PFAS. Okay, thank you.
Hey, sorry, I was gonna just go over where we left the water language. Is that your question,
I was
Maria?
gonna try to type it in.
Okay,
I
So-
just would recommend just tweaking that monitoring component.
so we're leaving in. Okay, so on line, you had something on line 11 or something on page 9.
Yeah, hold on a second. I'm looking at the wrong draft. I don't have the paper copy of the current draft.
Here's an extra copy right here.
Thanks. It would just be, on page 9. It would read something like submit a plan to A&R establishing a program that monitors the wastewater discharge from the data center, comma, including monitoring for the presence of PFAS. And then I would probably do a new sentence and say the monitoring plan must be approved by, or shall be approved by the agency.
Of natural resources.
Yeah,
Did you get them? Yes. And then what 13 through 16, how does that read then?
I think you read it as Maria has it. The addition of PFAS to water discharge from the data center shall be prohibited from monitoring.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Rep. Kleppner?
That's it. You know, do we want this for belts and suspenders, to add at the end of the sentence, which says, which must be approved by the agency, something like, comma, which shall take any action necessary to protect Vermonters' health.
How about something that would,
The Senate.
the agency should, the monitoring plan shall be approved by the agency on a determination that it meets the Vermont water quality standards.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
Does that work for you?
That works for me.
It meets the Vermont water quality standards.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, water?
I need to go back to that question
Mm-hmm.
on where. So PUC is suggested that this,
Oh, yeah.
and I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, we're not, so we have a unicorn. And so, nobody is familiar with it. And so, goes there. So can you talk about,
I mean, there are unicorn sections in Act 250. I think the Peter and Rick were talking about the quarry section, that's a unicorn section. You could move this into Act 250 as a standalone section.
does that make sense to you? I mean,
Um,
I shouldn't say, does that make sense
Not
to you? Do you
following.
see any advantage to moving it into the Act 250 section of law as opposed to the public service section of law where it currently is?
well, I don't know who said it earlier. There is that distinction. The PUC is reviewing the contract and reliability and versus Act 250 looking at the appropriateness of sightings. This is more of a sighting requirement.
Sorry, so what, we're talking about title something versus something, what page are we on?
We're at the
Where are we?
beginning.
I mean, it's
Water
just
section.
generally section 286.
Okay, so we're sticking that right now into the PUC section.
Yes, this is in Title 30 currently.
That's better suited than that.
Oh, sorry, so I've come back around to knowing what we're talking about. So we're talking about whether we should move it out of that
Yeah.
into,
Title 10 and make it a standalone section in Act 250. Because this is going through Act 250.
Mhm.
You would say something like at the beginning, when development is a data center underneath this chapter, the data center shall identify to the commission It's well, it'll be just to the district commission reviewing the data center's application, and then all the rest of it's the same.
Yeah, no, I think it will be a title 10 next time.
So if we do that, there's one other change I think that connects to that, on page 7. B, page 7, line 15.
Right, you get rid of the
Oh.
reference to the commission.
Yeah, we have to take it.
Okay. Everybody good with that?
I absolutely did not catch it, Reverend Brunner. But
So,
good friends in the room did. What did you say?
okay. So,
Do
Does
you
anybody-
mind if I go to another committee?
no, I was gonna ask, I feel like we're done talking about water. Mike, you've been so helpful
Thank
to our
you.
committee. Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate it. Y'all have a good weekend.
Okay, thanks. So,
Mike, can I get a chance? We just email it.
Yeah.
okay, so, does anybody have any further comments or questions on this bill?
Just a one word thing on page 5, line 8. Or line 9, you should just say secretary of the agency, not the resources.
You struck that.
We struck that,
Oh, we struck that. Okay, we're good then. Never mind.
What? What's good?
So I have a couple. One is on page 3, line 18. It has been suggested that we have missed at the end there, we should add paired with energy storage. So that would be including provisions requiring implementation of demand side management operational measures for the purpose of maintaining grid stability and efficiency, including demand response, flexible load management practices such as load shifting, peak shaving, and the use of distributed energy resources paired with energy storage.
I thought DER included
It does
storage.
include-
That's what my understanding.
What's that?
Storage is a DER.
That's a consider DER.
So I think the stakeholder who was suggesting that would pursue that downstairs. Then I have one more, which is in the new section.
This is the report,
This
the
is-
decommissioning.
Yeah, and just my request is that we I don't think, well, I guess we should talk about whether or not we want a study or if we want recommendations and if we're putting in a study, that does seem to suggest hiring experts, and we do not want it here as opposed to
Recommendation.
recommendations.
That's better.
If that doesn't trigger the money conversation, that's fine. I mean, it's clear what we want, recommendations and draft legislation.
Let me ask Mr. Faber if he has any suggestions on how we should frame this, not whether or not we should do it.
Right. If you're just asking for a recommendation from the departments in consultation with whoever, that makes it a lot easier.
Recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody okay with that?
No, I'm not speaking for the department.
No, we're just
Okay.
asking you for the framing of,
That was posed to me.
Yes.
That's how I would.
yes,
Less time and.
It's less of a formal
right.
process.
It's relying on.
So on line 14, it says shall conduct a study. So the title of the section should be recommendation on data center decommissioning, and then
Yes.
shall make recommendations in line 14 on data center commissioning. Let's look through for any other.
Or provide.
Sure, whatever. Maria.
Recommend a regulatory model for data center decommissioning.
Oh, yeah, line 17, it's there again.
That's December 15th. We get that back.
Okay. Any final?
So.
Yeah.
May I ask one more question with regard to this bill and the decommissioning? So I would not want a contract to be signed. Like the contract between the DU and that you all are looking to approve before we have that language for the decommissioning. So is it possible that could happen? That there could be a contract signed before December 15th, given what's necessary for the contract?
Let's go back and see what has to be in the
It
contract.
does seem unlikely.
Seems very unlikely.
Yeah, but we struck all mention of decommissioning out of the contract.
Right, but would someone be able to negotiate a contract and cite a project concurrently in that short of a time span? I'm thinking not.
Because they have to have the siting.
Yeah, typically
As a
you do
part
it
of the
together.
contract.
Yeah, you one before the other, but typically start both of them. And there's water quality permits you'd have to get here. My goodness, those are going to take you years to get those. So I don't think that.
But we haven't put things in order intentionally,
but-
allowing
But you need
companies to pursue parallel.
when you pursue a permit, like a water quality permit, and often includes studies, which must take place before you even start your application for the site.
Oh, right, because actually, no, because the decommissioning is likely gonna live in 250.
Right.
Right, so 250 is not gonna be done before.
No,
So that
no,
a contract could be signed.
you could start it at the same time, but it's unlikely that will even happen.
Yeah. Okay,
That's right, because there's permits built in here that don't even exist yet.
You have to do studies to get those permits, and those take months, if not years.
Well, I'm thinking about also too, I think I'm talking about something slightly different than you, which is that we're requiring permits to be procured here, and those permits they haven't even been developed yet, once in 2028, right?
So I think we're in for the question.
Okay, sorry.
Okay,
Greg, do you have a
jump in.
question?
Well, just some things I want to point out. This has to do with changing things from Title 30 to Title 10. Because all this stuff is living in Title 30 right now, and that's an artifact of having us do the citing in the first place when this bill was originally developed. So if you look at section 287 on page 9. And this has to do with quarterly and annual reports. So the line 19 says in the form and manner determined by the commission. That's appropriate for Act 250 to do at this point. We don't need reports on energy usage as long as the contract is correctly designed. We wouldn't really need those kind of reports. Now, Act 250 might want reports on the water. That seems appropriate. But we don't need the energy usage reports, which are on the next page. That's on page 10 on line 1. And the itemization of the data center payments toward infrastructure, that's done up front. The utility will not build that infrastructure until you pay them. It's not a ongoing kind of payment thing. You have to pay that upfront, so that the idea of getting annual reports on that doesn't really make any sense. So I would change that to Act 250 and then move it to Title 10. That whole section. Does that make any sense?
I'm just getting there. The information feels really important to me. So if that information is not being reported on a regular basis to the commission and the department.
If there's any problems with the energy usage that weren't taken care of in the contract, the utility is going to come to us at that point and say, we need to change that contract because something is going wrong. Having an annual or quarterly report on that, it's not really useful to us.
I think where I'm at with that data is not, I was reading this differently.
Oh.
So for example, like on page 10, line 5, so presuming, provided that one data center is here, the commissioner shall include in the department's annual report. And then all this valuable data, well, that comes to us. So I'm not,
Oh, I think we're looking at the different sections.
okay, where are you?
Talking about A.
I'm talking about
Okay.
section 287. You're looking at B. Yeah, you're looking at B.
Okay,
B, I'm not suggesting any changes there. It's A, these are quarterly energy reports coming to us. That's not seeing how that's useful to us.
So actually, I think, Greg, Mr. Faber, I think you were suggesting moving 287 into Title 10.
Right, and
But-
just taking us out of it.
So then,
Just then,
but then we have B is about the department.
oh, yeah,
so-
so leave B, yeah, leave B and yeah, so not the whole section, you're right,
So,
but just A. Because you want if Act 250 wants those water usage reports, and maybe they do. This should live in their title.
so
Secretary?
I want to make a suggestion.
mhm.
I want to suggest that we ask Mr. Faber, and I promise that will work with him to bring this section to the Senate. It seems like there's a fair number of moving pieces, and it might be good to have,
Section A.
yeah, just to make, I mean, we're looking at the time and knowing we have,
You are.
well, we have another draft that Maria said we need to get for us, and so if the committee is okay with that, I would be willing. And if that's the intent, if the committee was to do that.
I'm interested in the data in section B. So as long as we're not changing that, I'm okay with us working on A down the road.
Yeah, I think it's just reconstructing the section to put it in different sections. And
Okay,
I mean, the Senate will do it right there.
I'm fine. So we're gonna leave it.
That's my recommendation, Madam Chair. It just feels like this, just to get this just right, might take us a minute or two.
Fine by me?
So I will work,
Rick Casper?
I will work with you on that.
Is
Mr.
there
Faber.
any danger to leaving that in there? To where it would stay in there as written?
Mr. Faber will have more work.
And we might get useless reports.
That would be the first time ever.
Yeah, right?
No, we never get those, so it'd be
I
unusual.
mean, you guys are pretty overstaffed right here.
Yeah, we're overstaffed. To read reports.
All right. Yeah, and just as a reminder to folks, we may not even recognize this one. Oh, we'll see what happens in the Senate. So, Maria, what's your timeline? Does anybody have any additional comments before we get a final draft for vote? Maria, what's your timeline?
No.
Because we have other stuff we could do.
I might be able to have it done by 4.
Okay,
Do you have what you for Mike?
great. Okay, so we'll look at a final draft of this for a vote at 4, and that should give us enough time to vote out our committee bill. So let's switch gears. And I know our clerk will tell me the right words to say.
It's really easy.
Okay, good. Let me get to Bill ER 260781. An act relating to something. All right, so on Friday, March 13th, we should be looking at DR 260781, draft 3.1. That's in the folder. And just as a reminder, folks, and Ellen will have to get a final cleaned up copy to submit, but we had on page 1, line 19, a change that the PUC had requested. The entity appointed under may. So this is the Burlington Electric section. Then there's the whole energy planning section, which is unchanged, I think. Sorry, I'm on page 10 already. Bottom of page 10, we had a just an edit that we had missed that the RPCs had submitted. And then on page 11, we knocked out the telecom plan language because that's in the budget, both the language and the funding cut, basically. So that is the bill. This bill isn't going anywhere else. So we'll vote it out today. It'll be on notice Tuesday. It'll be on the floor Wednesday, Thursday. And I'm planning to be the floor reporter. So any questions or discussion?
Still sticking to what I suggested. It's a shame that we can't get any further with that. I really feel strongly about that. And unfortunately, the other pieces of the bill, I was all in favor of. This one piece I'm not.
Okay. Dara, what do we say?
I'm supportive.
Okay. And what am I supposed to, what's support? How do we get a motion?
So we need a motion to approve the bill draft number for introduction, because this is a committee bill that was not been introduced.
Okay.
So that, and just the one motion to do it. And then there's some directions for you as reporter.
Okay, so to approve it for introduction. All right, anybody want to make that motion?
I move we approve draft 3.1 26-0781 for introduction.
Okay, clerk.
Representative Bailey,
Yes.
Representative Campbell,
Yes.
Representative Howland,
Yeah.
Representative Putner,
Yes.
Representative Moore, Representative Delia,
Yes.
Representative Southwood, Representative Torrey, yep, and Chair James.
Yes.
Okay, that is 810.
Okay, so that gets a number, goes on notice. Floor Wednesday, Thursday. I'll be working on my floor report. I'll let folks know if I have any questions. And then since we're killing time here for a minute, and I want to allow just a 10-minute break before we vote, but let's wrap up odds and ends. Okay, so next step for all of our bills. I did go down to approach to introduce and talk about 740, the greenhouse gas reduction bill. We had a good conversation. There were good questions. I was there for like half an hour. I mean, it was pretty robust. And one good piece of news is that JFO is revising the anticipated cost of the bill downward a little bit. They thought ANR had kind of overestimated the amount of funding they needed for this 2 FTE. So that came down from 300,000 to 185,000. So the total cost of the requested base appropriation to A&R is now probably going to be something a little bit less than 500,000 a year. I mean, sorry, 400. Thanks. And I think that what's going to happen, no crystal ball, but I think that next week, approps will probably do what they often do, which is that if it's not a slam dunk for the money, they'll strip out the money, they'll vote it out, on whatever vote, probably some for, some against. And then our funding request, our $400,000 that's attached to that bill goes into like a contingency list, and they prioritize those. So there could be 20 things in order of, if funds become available, we would like you to fund, first this, then that, then that, then that. It's called like a cascade or waterfall money. And I'm just speculating, but it seems like that is going to be the fate. So this will probably come to the floor without any money on it. And the funding will be contingent on funds becoming available wherever that falls on a contingency list on the Senate side, or even next year in BAA. So, however, we have to pass, the bill has to make it all the way across the finish line, passed by the House, passed by the Senate, signed by the Gov, for the bill to be there in case the money becomes available. So that's 740. I don't know what happened with 718. How'd it go?
Went okay. I imagine the same thing's gonna happen. You probably want to get a contingency list.
Okay.
But I think the questions were good. Reception seemed good. It seems like they'll pass it, but I don't know.
Okay. 753 off to the Senate. Congrats. Great job on your floor report, Darren. Thank you. I'm missing something. Committee bill. I'm not missing something. Committee bill, data center, greenhouse gas, building energy code, disconnections, which brings us to our final thing. So this is a very funny quirk of the universe. So our conversations about the Joint Carbon Emissions Reduction Committee ended with us not voting out a bill, but deciding we were going to write like a recommendation letter after crossover. And lo and behold, unbeknownst to anybody in this committee, GovOps Technical Correction Bill updates the Joint Carbon Emissions Reduction Committee. So there's a bill, H927, that's going to be on the floor on Tuesday. The very first page updates it's a very long bill with a zillion technical corrections. The only thing GovOps did was add us. They didn't change any other language. And because I know that this really mattered to some members of our committee, I have offered an amendment. It's already submitted, that adds that on both the House and Senate side, not all members can be from the same party. So that amendment is drafted. It's submitted to the clerk. I'll go and, pitch it to House GovOps, but I already talked to the chair and vice chair, and feel pretty confident it will be a friendly amendment. So you'll see me stand up to offer that on the floor on Tuesday, I guess. So we'll be at it, as official members, or we'll have an appointee to that committee. And we've added our language about not all members of that committee on both the House and Senate side being from the same party. So that's that. That's joint carbon. That's 927. Data centers might have to go to Ways and Means.
For what?
Huh?
For what?
I don't know. And I'm not sure. I don't know, Marie, if you have any ideas about that.
What's that? Why data centers might have to go to Ways and Means?
Yeah, Chair Kornheiser said that data centers might have to come to Ways and Means real quick, and she pointed out the use of some word somewhere. I don't think it was study. I think anyway.
Permit, maybe fees with money.
To be honest, it was like a conversation in passing. I didn't have a chance, just,
Gross receipts tax.
Yeah.
oh, that's what it is. It's the
Yeah.
mention of the gross
Yeah.
receipts tax.
Okay.
We didn't want to let them out of that.
Huh?
No.
I mean, you can take that word out, this
They're not gonna do anything.
still have the intent of it. That's
You
what-
wanted it back. You-
We'll leave
I
it.
think you can get to the intent of it without that exact word, but I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, just leave it. They're not gonna mess around with it.
We don't want to leave any money on the table for our
Yeah.
friends over at the PUC.
Okay,
They'd have to do it anyway.
so that's that.
Okay, well,
So,
there you go.
so we've got two to probes, one maybe ways and means, others straight to the floor, and then next week, and then bills coming from the Senate. So we have S202, plug-in solar. We're gonna take that up next week. We're starting to line up testimony. I'm making sure that we're gonna allow time to hear from, I'm sorry, I can't remember what it stands for, UL, Underwriters
Underwriters
Laboratories. UL is coming in. We're trying to track down the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
I
Oh, you
got
found
that.
that?
Yeah, I'm talking on one.
Okay.
Have you got anybody from, the control section of the, not control section, system protection of a utility?
We have all the utilities coming in. So
At their government affairs level or at their?
they usually, what they usually do is we reach out to the government affairs person and they bring whoever they need to bring,
Or they come back?
or they come back. Yeah. So,
Vision of fire safety.
yes. Division of, yeah, yep, Division of Fires. What we did was we looked at everybody that the Senate heard from. And it was a pretty long list. It was like DPS, PUC, fire safety, the advocates. We have a group coming in who makes these units. We have UL, we have the electrical workers. It's a pretty long list. I don't think we're even gonna get it all done next week.
So
All the utilities.
the Division of Fire Safety, FP 101, then the electrical code itself, the people from the electrical code subsection of FP 101, fire thing.
So I'll tell you what, when the agenda is posted, this is not like the be all end all. We invited like 15 initial witnesses. So when the agenda is posted, everybody can take a look at it and you can either make suggestions or we can get through the first round of testimony and see what we didn't cover. Cause I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be vague. I
No,
sent a really long list to Alex. And if the information that witnesses come in with doesn't feel detailed enough, we'll come back to it. It's not like we're voting this out next week.
no, but just the level of cause when you said you were bringing in what was the union people you were bringing in from?
The electricians,
The electrical, no, you said the electrical workers.
I'm sorry, I meant electricians.
Okay.
Alex, who did we get?
It's the electrical workers.
It is the electrical workers. IBEW?
IBEW, so to me, the IBEW is on the distribution voltage, not the consumption voltage.
Okay,
So that was my concern, is because we're plugging in at the consumption.
okay.
You would take like a residential.
Well, so it's that portion, so the line work, the IBEW works under the National Electric Safety Code. The housing works under the National Electric Code.
Okay,
So I am specifically looking for the detail at the underneath the breaker, underneath the meter, behind the meter.
okay. So I think my suggestion stands. We'll get the agenda posted, see who's coming in. You can either make a suggestion based on the initial list, or we can take a whole big round of testimony and then see what what gaps we need to fill in. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you've got expertise here
No,
that I
no,
do
no,
not.
I'm just looking for that particular specialty
Okay,
of that individual.
okay,
Or the individual who may know of, which I do not. I
okay.
depended on other persons in my career for such a determination.
Okey doke.
But I was around to hear.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll make sure we get you the testimony that you want. That is all I know. So why don't we take a break and come back in 7 minutes and 29 seconds.